Thank you guys for being with us. I truly hope my dogs do not start barking in the middle of this. One of the things working from home, right, that we have to deal with. So again, I'm Dawn Liberta. I'm going to start off. And the presentation we're giving is demystifying DCF. As Casey said, when you hear DCF, or Child Protective Investigation, we don't normally get a very warm welcoming. So we kind of just want to teach you a little bit about what it is that we do. So the biggest myth about child abuse is that the dangers to children come from strangers, from people on the street. A lot when, at least in my generation, when we were growing up, you know, your parents taught you to stay away from strangers, away from cars passing by, don't talk to anybody. But in child abuse cases, the perpetrator is typically someone that the child knows, and typically is a parent or relative, or someone very close to the child or children. Today we're going to talk about what abuse, abandonment, and neglect is. If you do see those things, what it is that you should do moving forward. So what is abuse? Abuse is any willful act or threatened act that results in any physical, mental, or sexual injury or harm that causes or is likely to cause the child's physical, mental, or emotional health to be significantly impaired. You know, the other day we were on some staffings, child death staffings, unfortunately, and a question came up, well, is it neglect or abuse? Just remember, neglect, abandonment, and physical abuse all go under the realm of abuse. So abuse of a child includes acts or omissions. Corporal discipline does not in and itself constitute abuse when it does not result in harm of the child. There's a lot of talk in the community, you know, where people say you can't hit your child because it constitutes abuse. That's not accurate. That's not how the law, that's not what the law states. You are able to discipline your child. You can't cause harm to your child. Tracy, you could take it away.
So we're going to talk about what is harm. And harm overall is the effect on the child. So harm to a child's health or welfare can occur when any person inflicts or allows to be inflicted upon the child physical, mental, or emotional injury. So there has to be an effect on the child. And some of the factors that are considered are the age of the child, the prior history of injuries, the location of the injury, multiplicity of the injury, and the type of trauma inflicted. A lot of times for the location of the injury is important because a lot of times it can be hidden under clothes and stuff, and as opposed to in plain view where someone can expect to possibly see a bruise or something.
That's why when, sorry, Trey, that's why when investigators go out to investigate, you'll see, if you've ever seen it, they'll lift the child's shirt or lift the arms. They pay great attention to what the child is wearing in comparison to what the weather is like outside. Go ahead, Trace.
Results of harm: neglects the child, exposes the child to a controlled substance or alcohol, engages in violent behavior that demonstrates a wanton disregard for the presence of the child, and fails to protect the child. So what is child neglect? Any person who is responsible for a child and fails to provide for the child's basic and essential needs, such as food, clothing, or shelter. Neglect also involves not meeting the child's needs on a physical, medical, educational, or emotional level. So if you your child has, you failed to take your child to the dentist and the child has a toothache or issues, that is also neglect.
And remember that being poor is not a reason for an abuse report. But the parent needs to be able to find resources in the community to provide things such as food, clothing, and shelter. And we have we're a very resourceful community in Broward County. And thankfully, we have so many resources to help those families out there. And that really is part of what Tracy and my job is to be able to connect those families to those things.
Yeah.
So types of child abuse and neglect and maltreatments are domestic violence, inadequate supervision, environmental hazards, physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental injury, which, by the way, is one of the hardest ones to prove because there's no physical findings. So it can be very, very difficult. Failure to thrive, substance misuse, medical neglect, family violence, failure to protect, human trafficking, substance exposed newborns, bone or skull fractures, internal injuries, death, abandonment, asphyxiation. So just some of the ones, failure to protect, for instance, I want to give you an example of that because I find that a lot of people that aren't in the child welfare system don't quite understand what failure to protect means. So for example, let's say there's domestic violence going in the home. The child is present or at least in the house during the domestic violence. It's happened over and over and over again. The child keeps witnessing it. Well, it would be failure to protect from whatever parent, usually the victim parent, for not getting themselves and the children outside of the home. It could be failure to protect if you have a child that's being sexually abused by someone in the house and you know or should have known and had not done anything about it. Those are some types of failure to protect. And please, if you have any questions, put them in the thing and we will get to them. Sexual abuse is a form of child abuse in which a child is abused for the sexual gratification of an adult or older adolescent. We do have child-on-child sexual abuse, which is exactly what it says, a child sexually abusing another child. In addition to direct sexual contact, it can also involve the inappropriate touching of the child, the perpetrator's exposure of sexual organs, the viewing or filming of pornography, or pressures on the child to engage in sexual activity. So in order to have sexual abuse, you do not actually have to have penetration. So it includes sexual abuse, includes all of these things. Mental injury is an injury to the intellectual or psychological capacity of a child as evidenced by, sorry, I just lost my space, guys. Substantial impairment in the ability to function within the normal range of performance and behavior. So this is the one we kind of talked about earlier on, where it is not one of the easiest ones to prove because you don't have any physical evidence. You know, in physical abuse, you have it. Sexual abuse, you sometimes have it. Neglect, you could typically see it whether you're in the home or on their body. This one is and can be very difficult, and it happens quite often.
And it's subtle. So that's one of the reasons that it's so difficult, is because it's a subtle behavior. All right. Sorry, just a second. Okay. Abandonment. So abandonment is a situation in which the parent or legal custodian of the child, somebody in a caregiving role for the child, while being able, makes no provision for the child's support and has failed to establish or maintain a substantial and positive relationship with the child. A lot of times we see this if in a petition, when we move forward with dependency, if you have a parent who's been absent, or a parent who doesn't pay child support or try and maintain a relationship with the child, that's abandonment.
And we do see it way too often in our older teens that may now be showing some behaviors or mental health, and the parents just don't know what to do with those behaviors. And let's say they end up in DJJ, and then the parent may refuse to pick them up from the DJJ center or from a Baker Act, and that ends up having an abuse report called in, and the child will end up coming into care due to abandonment, which is not what's best for that child.
Some of the high-risk indicators include domestic violence, the young age of parents, unexplained injuries, vulnerable children, 0 to 3, but it's usually under 5, substance abuse, and mental health. So if any of these factors are present, there's a higher chance that you're going to end up with an abuse, abandonment, or neglect situation. So now we're going to get into who is a mandated reporter. The simple answer is pretty much everyone's a mandated reporter. But according to Florida statute, it is any person who knows or has reasonable cause to suspect that a child is abused, abandoned, or neglected by a parent, legal custodian, caregiver, or other person responsible for the child's welfare, shall report such knowledge or suspicion to the Department of Children and Families. So this doesn't mean that you have to 100% know that there's an abuse situation going on. It's enough to have a reasonable cause to suspect, and that obligates you to contact the hotline and to make the report.
Once upon a time, this wasn't the law. Once upon a time, the law really was very specific about the who. So your doctors, your teachers, your social workers, nurses, things of that nature, those professions. And then it changed. And I think I really do think this is one of the better law changes. I think it's all of our responsibility in the community to look out for the children in our community.
So there's 4 ways that you can make a report. You can call the hotline, which is 1-800-96-ABUSE. You can make a report by TTY, by fax, a little old-fashioned, but and now you can make a report online at reportabuse.dcf.state.fl.us. All of these ways are available 24/7, so you don't have to, wait for a certain hour to make a report. You can do it at any time.
We do find, however, that doing it online is probably the easiest way to go about it.
The only way that you'll actually know if a report was accepted or not is if you call it in. Because you actually speak to a person and they'll let you know if the call was accepted or not accepted.
Mm-hmm.
For somebody to go out and investigate. So again, the report of known or suspected abuse should be made to the hotline, and it's 1-800-96-ABUSE or 1-800-962-2873. And any person who suspects abuse and fails to report it, it's committing a third-degree felony.
Yeah, it's just so important that, you know, we don't turn our heads on this as a community. There's been a lot of talk, especially through COVID, about abuse reports being down because kids aren't in school, things of that nature. And it's not overall true about the reports being down. In some areas, they are down. Some areas they've maintained. And I think a lot of that reason for maintaining is because we do have a great community that is watching out for our own, and we really do need to continue to do that. The children that are being abused in the house, they don't have the same voice that we have, and so we really do have to fight for them. Is this mine, Trey?
Go ahead.
So information that you need when you call in an abuse report, it's very important that you have this. If you don't, then there is a good chance that they're not going to take it. So they're going to want to know who is involved, who are the people. Even if you just have the parent's name and you don't necessarily have the children's name, more than likely they'll take it, but you're going to need to know at least someone's name. You're going to need to know what happened. And I cannot stress this enough. You really have to explain into great detail as much as you know about what's going on. And when you're explaining that, you need to make sure that you are talking about the abuse, the neglect, or the abandonment. You should know when it occurred, where it occurred, why did it happen, and how it happened. And although it doesn't say it on here, maybe on the next slide, you have to know where they are. So let's say you don't know an address. Oh, here it is. An address for the family. At least know the school information, where the child could be located. If you have no idea where they could be located, they're unable to take the report because they have no way of investigating it, right? So you want to give them the name, the date of birth, or approximate age if you don't have it, race if you have it, the gender, and all the adult and child subjects. Again, the address if you have it. If you don't, you need somewhere that they can reach the child, and that would typically be their school information. And if you have it, any mental or physical limitation on the children and or the parents, if you know it. If you're able, they will ask you if you know if the family has any guns in the house or anything like that, and that's really for the purpose of the investigators and the police officers going out there. They're going to want to know child's current whereabouts. Again, the potential risk to the investigators. So is there any guns, possible drugs, anything that you know? If you know it, is really great information to have just to keep everybody safe, including the children and our investigators. Names, phone numbers, participants, and or witnesses. Witnesses are very important. And then any other pertinent information to help locate the child. So this is asked a lot on regular calls that Tracy and I get. Do I have to give my name? So the answer is yes and no. So reporters in the following occupation categories are required to provide their names to the hotline staff. That's medical personnel, law enforcement, school personnel, Under Florida Statute 39.201, reporters in the following occupation categories are required. So school teachers or other school officials or personnel, social workers, your daycare workers, summer camps, aftercare staff, child care, foster care, residential or institutional workers, law enforcement, medical professionals, judges, the attorneys in the courtroom. I will say this. I know that most people are afraid to give their information because they don't want that information given to the family who the report is being called in on, which I understand. But it is so important if you're able to get past that. It really is important for the investigators and the police officers to have that information, just so that way they're able to have the conversation with the actual person calling it into the hotline, and really able to get good information. It's good to know that all reports are confidential. Hotline counselors will not acknowledge the existence of any report or release any information provided by the caller or contained in a report. Any person with a statutory right to a report copy must contact the local investigative office. The reporter's name will not be provided. So this is the most important part. Your name, if you call it in, will not be provided to the alleged perpetrators or the family, to anybody.
The investigator will know who calls in the report, because the investigator needs that information and needs to be able to contact you to get additional information, but it's not disclosed to anybody else.
Now, we do hear a lot, well, the investigator told so-and-so that I called it in. I will tell you that 99.9% of the time, that's not the case. Sometimes it's not difficult for the families to figure out who did call it in. So that does happen, that they'll figure it out on their own, but the investigator will not let them know of who that individual was that called it in. So family will not be told who made the report. DCF's response. So when they go out, always on the first visit to the home, after they receive the abuse report, they'll coordinate with their local law enforcement, and they follow that protocol. And basically, the law enforcement will meet the PI out to the home or the school, wherever it is that they're going to make first contact. And that was put in place quite a while ago. Now, it wasn't put in place all over the state of Florida right away. That kind of came in slow patches, from circuit to circuit. In Broward County, they've been doing it for a very long time. And I think that it was just easier because when the state of Florida privatized, in Broward County, BSO their civilians became the investigators. So it was really a lot easier to coordinate. But now they do it throughout the state, just to keep everybody safe. The PI will contact the reporter. So whoever it is that called in the report, they'll contact them to get witness's statement. They'll check criminal history, any prior reports, consult with fellow caseworkers. So before they even get out to the home, they're going to find out if anybody in that family has any criminal history, if they have any prior abuse reports, and if they do, and they weren't the ones that investigated it, they will speak with the worker that did previously investigate. Their job is to investigate the family as a whole, including history, not just the incident that occurred right this second, because past abuse reports could be red flags for what's going on now. They'll get any previous notifications to law enforcement. They'll locate, observe, interview the child, siblings, and parents. And they will interview the child alone, out in the house or outside of the house, depending on where the child feels comfortable. And then depending on the type of case it is, they're referred to the child protection team in Broward County. So DCF will make collateral contacts. And I say DCF only because we oversee the contracts in Broward. It's really BSO in Broward County that's doing this. So your BSO CPS worker will make collateral contacts to teachers, guidance counselors, daycare providers, neighbors, family. So depending on how old the child is and the different places they are in the community, they will have collateral contacts with those individuals. They'll make referrals for evaluations, testing, or services, depending on what is happening with the family. So if there's substance abuse going on in the home, they'll make immediate referrals for substance abuse testing and services for the family. The children are delayed, they'll make referrals for evaluations just to really see where the child is and what services need to be put in place. They'll close case with no ongoing services, make community service referrals, or continue service intervention and supervision or sheltering the children. So they really have 5 options. So they'll do the investigation. It's blatantly unfounded. Nothing happened in the family and they could just close out the case. Then they may go out to the home. They'll investigate. Those children are safe in the home, but maybe there are some stressors going on. So they'll put in-home services in, and they could close the case. So they may still put services in, but it doesn't rise to the level where the child is unsafe that they need to go into the dependency system. Then they may investigate. There's stuff going on. They need case management oversight, which in Broward County is ChildNet. And so they'll make the determination that the children are unsafe, but they don't necessarily feel like the family needs to go to court. So they'll close the case as in-home non-judicial. So that means they'll have a case manager on the case that will be visiting them on a regular basis. They'll be providing services to the family and really watching over. Then the 4th thing you have is in-home judicial, which is the children are unsafe, but they're safe enough to stay at home. With services, they'll have a case manager attached, but they will also have a judge. So the family has to go to court. They'll get a case plan, and there's certain things they have to do in order to close out the case and not have their child removed. And then final, and the one that we really don't want to do unless the child is really unsafe with the family and cannot stay there, and that is we will shelter the child. And in that case, it'll be put with a relative, a non-relative, or in the foster care system. Trace, you could take over.
Some of the common child fatalities that we see when they're reported are drowning, bed sharing or other unsafe sleep environments, a hot car, and accidental deaths. And one of the reasons that it's important to call in these deaths is so that we can get the information that's needed to see what can be done on a bigger level to try and prevent some of these things from happening. But it's also sometimes the people that are at these the scene when there is a death struggle with, do they call it in or not, because it can be overwhelming to the family when they've just gone through a tragedy. But it is important that everybody calls in these incidents.
Yeah, and in I'm going to talk for Broward, even though it's pretty much the same throughout the state of Florida. Which, if you were there in the beginning with the doctor's information, you'll know that drowning and unsafe sleep are our top two reasons why children under 5 pass away. And so it's so important for us to be able to get a lot of information on what was going on during these times. So, one, so we could collect data, and two, when an abuse report is called in, and I won't say all the time, but the majority of the time, the only thing that will happens with the family is that we'll provide services to that family and their surviving siblings as well. So it gives us the ability to really kind of get in there, get the family services that they need. So that way they are able to somewhat move on and not necessarily continue to blame themselves for this. So we don't want a report to be called in because we want to do any kind of blame game. And we want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. But we do want to go out. We want to be able to collect the data, which helps us make determinations on how we could do things better in our community. And it allows us to provide the services.
So some ways to prevent fatalities is through water safety, which includes swim lessons, adequate supervision, a fence around the body of water, door alarms. Those are all things that we've talked about earlier today. Knowing the basics of safe sleeping, which is ABC, alone, place babies on their back, and uncluttered cribs. There's lists of community resources and referrals that are available that people call all the time, and we'd like to give out that information. And then we have the non-judicial and judicial in-home services, where there is a case manager that will follow the family and do home visits and provide the resources for them as well. So that kind of wraps up our Demystifying DCF. We'd like to open it up for any questions.
Now I have to figure out where to find the chat for the questions. Right now I'm seeing.
I could address it for you girls. At this point I don't see any, but I think that just give them a moment to kind of process it. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that what you shared, even towards like the tail end, as far as the drownings and the situations happening, and when you call it in, you guys do create a safety plan and you provide so many amazing resources to those families. And so we want to encourage all law enforcement, teachers, healthcare professionals, all of serves families, to make sure that you're calling those in, because it's not in a way to tattle on the family or hurt the family. It's just to be able to help them. And so I think that you sharing that was just really, really great. Now it's open. Any questions, anybody? Do you have any questions for Tracy or Dawn? Wow.
No question.
I think you did such a good job. You don't have, there's nothing left to answer, right? Okay. Well, anything else you feel like you wanted to make sure you addressed? I know we have 22 people that are in our call, in our breakout session, and this is the time to ask any specific questions. And I think that you having like such a well-rounded presentation, it was really, really helpful too.
I think that just one thing you guys should know, because I find that a lot of people, and I touched on it, is that, back in 2003, the state decided to privatize our foster care system. And so what that means is that DCF was no longer the people that were doing the case management when children were moved or went into the foster care system, and we privatized that. So in Broward County and Palm Beach County, it's ChildNet. And Broward County is there's a few of us out in the state, but one of the only counties that fully privatized. And what I mean by that is we have ChildNet doing the case management. We have BSO CPIS civilians, not police officers, doing the investigations, the initial investigations, the removals, things like that. And then we have the AG's office that is doing the dependency court system. A lot of places throughout the state, ECF is still doing investigations. Where Broward, we're pretty much fully privatized, and it's really great. We work really well together.
Absolutely. I think so too. I think that we're all such a collaboration with all of us. And so I think it definitely works.
Yeah.
So if you don't have any questions, then I guess we are good. Your presentation will be able to be shared, I believe, as long as you guys give approval to that. My suggestion would be jump in a couple minutes, go to the main stage, go to the resource area. Again, we have a lot of great videos there. But I think you guys covered everything so well, and I really do appreciate both of you and your partnership. I know that anything that I ask of either one of you, you're usually, yes, whatever you need. So I do appreciate it because it really does help. And I think, like you said, like all of the different agencies working together on so many different areas, you don't realize that we're all kind of interconnected in essence, but we really are. And it really does help the overall picture of helping our kids and our families.
Absolutely.
So I'm really grateful for both of you and the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you so much. I think we're going to go back to the main session because, again, what we're going to do is the Wheel of Fortune little prizes again. We don't want to miss that because the last time I talked so much that we all missed it. And then we're going to just talk a little bit about Thursday, and then we'll be wrapping it up. But absolutely, thank you so much.
Bye, guys.